Doing him is our own Alex Weprin, who's the editor of Digital News Daily. He oversees all of our content regarding digital marketing strategies. Before that, he has written for Media Bistro, Read Business Information, and NBC. Please welcome Alex and Josh.
By the way, just one piece of truth in advertising. So that's not my Twitter handle. My Twitter handle sucks, so don't follow me anyway. I didn't block it down a long time ago, so it's suspended. I swear it wasn't me. There's a chance it was, but don't follow that handle. By the way.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alex Weprin. I'm joined by Joshua Palau. Joshua, thank you for coming to chat with me. I thought I would start. I know you've got some slides to show folks, but if you can kind of explain what is Bayer doing in with regards to navigating the in-house world and what have you learned?
So just one quick comment, just programming note. So we are not in-housed on buying our media. We still work with our agency partners to do that. But there's a blend of what we're doing, and so I was told this clicker is fickle, so I'm going to try and see if the slide works. But if it doesn't work, it's fine. But what we've done so far is really focus on having more subject matter expertise in the building, because just to take, that's okay, don't worry about it. There we go. So that's my team. So Bayer decided a while ago that digital was important. If you're a CPG in the room or you work with CPGs, that's not weird to you that it took us this long to figure it out. And what they did is create this team that I joined about 8 years ago. And my team has actually only been fully formed for about 8 months. And so our focus is in digital strategy, working directly with the brands. And so what we've learned there is the brands are hungry for this information. They're not experts. They don't know what they're doing, but they know they have to do something. And I will say it's a bit of a breath of fresh air in that they want us to tell them what to do, but they want to learn. On the lower half of that org chart is our what we call our platforms and our subject matter experts. So those 3 people to the other side of Jeff, and Jeff as well, they're all ex-agency people. They all had hands on the keyboards. They all did the things that our agencies have done or continue to do for us. And so we've learned again that having those subject matter experts in the building not only get the brands smarter, but also get our media plans smarter, because we're having more debates with our agencies to figure out what is the right mix. And really that I think has been our biggest differentiator compared to some other models I've seen.
Great. How has data informed your decision making here? Certainly, when you're talking about the different types of options that are out there, custom publishing, programmatic. How do you look at data when you kind of think about the marketing plan?
Yeah, so it's another. So again, just going sort of back to that history, there was this arc of where we thought we understood what we wanted, and we had data models that told us what we wanted, and then it took Paul, the guy with all the books, it took him about a week to figure out it was exactly wrong. And so data for us started to become, how do we use it to build the case for budget shifts, not only in the overall pie, but even within the digital channel. So we had a lot of deals that we just felt were not, they weren't beneficial to us. I mean, there's no nice way to say it. I think based on the data we were looking at, it probably made sense. We had a lot of high-priced, low data deals that had a low ROI, and so we pushed all in on a heavier focus on programmatic with some very specific targets that we're going after. I guarantee our competitors are doing somewhat of the same things, but we've picked ones, tested a small percentage of our budget against it, and then went all in on them, and we try to apply it across the platform. Because for those of you, across the portfolio. So for those of you who don't know, Bayer Consumer Health, a ton of brands you probably do and don't know about. I'm sure you're all familiar with aspirin, but Aleve, Coppertone, Claritin, Dr. Scholl's. But the idea that, hey, programmatic buying on a lookalike segment works well, whether it's insoles or whether it's pain relief, it's true. I mean, when I was at J&J, Baby, Neutrogena, Tylenol, none of them were wrong. I'm sorry, none of them were off from others. I mean, the media models always said the same things.
So something else that I wanted to talk about is that there seems to have been kind of I know we talked about a tipping point with regard to, when you look at a lot of new online brands, they tend to do most, if not all, of their marketing in-house, and that seems to be moving a little bit more towards older brands like more established brands like Bayer.
You can say older, it's fine. We're older.
But
you don't know the history of Bayer, by the way. Aside from aspirin, we invented heroin. Just so you know, it's part of the history, and it's totally true. And I'd argue we'd be more profitable if we had stuck with that one.
Why do you think that is? You know, what do you think is kind of, you know, what is the value that, you know, some of these older brands are seeing there?
Yeah, and funny you should ask. I have a slide for that. So I think, and your comment about tipping point is, I think, true. So when I talk about what's driving some of this stuff, for me, being someone who's been in, and I say this with no sort of pride, like I've been in this industry for a while. And it's been those Dollar Shave Clubs, those ancestries. I worked at Razorfish for years, and it was our .com clients that quickly moved away from us because they understood the value of what they were doing. And by bringing it in, I think we absolutely have hit a tipping point, because even just yesterday, I saw an article from Philips saying they don't need the middleman anymore. And so so now, to me, it's when you see big, old, stodgy companies like us decide this is where we want to go, like now we've hit a point. And so I focus on these four things behind me. They're pretty self-explanatory. I think the two that I highlight the most is our ability to have direct partnerships. And I've worked with direct partnerships with agencies together. It's not about having just a direct partnership without having your agency involved. I'd argue some partnerships, when you try to go direct without your agency involved, they're not a good thing. But the reality is Google, Facebook, Amazon are where we're going to spend the most of our money. The rest of that's going to fall into some automated bid platform that, again, if I have smarter people and good tools, I'll win there as well. So I think that's one of the biggest points. I think the other thing is there has been an increased push within organizations like ours to increase that digital expertise. And I have said, rather sarcastically but true, that I can't teach what I've done in 20 years in a lunch and learn. I'll try, but I can't do it. And by the way, and you should never accept that from anybody else. And I say that to my finance and my legal people. You can't teach me, 4 years of law school in a lunch and learn. So I'll help get you educated, but the fastest way to education is by having people in the building who do the thing. And if we don't have those people who are getting their hands dirty, who are actually doing the things, then it makes it harder for that marketer to understand, wait, why is my pacing not right? Why is it that it costs me more to buy this piece of data versus that? That's, I think, where they really start to understand, and then they become true marketers who not just understand TV and regular marketing planning, but actually digital as well.
So can you elaborate a little bit on that? When you talk about having folks internally that can be your internal experts, that seems like an interesting middle ground, right? Because where did the idea to kind of do that come from, and can you give any specific examples, or any where their expertise really came in handy?
Yeah. So I mean, I can cover off on a few. I think one. So the idea of having subject matter experts in house was a pretty sobering look by Bear of saying, hey, we don't have this expertise. We just don't. The gray-haired gentleman on the slide, like Jeff, he probably had the most expertise, but he was one person. And I would say this, he was sitting right in front of me. Jeff is nothing but one of the smartest people I've met, and we're a better organization with him there, but sometimes he gets lost in translation. And so I think what the organization realized is that we need more people who can translate all the tactics. And frankly, you can't have one guy do all that job. So I think for us, it was immediately saying, we need a search expert. And we don't need someone who understands how search works. We need someone who has set up a campaign in AdWords who can go in and look at things. So that's where we started, is hiring those types of people. I'll be 1,000% honest in that I wasn't sold when I first got there. I was like, this seems a little weird. And then as I started understanding the level of expertise of our marketers and some of what our plans had looked like, I actually completely believed in the model. And so the two examples I would give is, one is with Aaron, who leads Insights. We didn't have a great KPI framework in place. We had data that was coming in that we weren't sure how accurate it was, but more importantly, we, Bayer, didn't align on KPIs. So he went through this insanely painstaking process of coming up with 40 KPIs to measure. We don't measure them all. And created digital business reports in conjunction with our agency so that they give us the data, but he actually puts together the story, shares it with the digital strategists, and we meet with the partners. And 90% of the time, even higher than that, every brand marketer that walks out of those DBRs, with digital business reviews, says that's the best media I've had today. Because they actually understand how their digital investment is paying off, and they also feel like they know what to do next. I'll leave the other example off because I'm talking.
So, how do you, obviously you're a company that has great relationships with agencies. You've got direct relationships as well. So how do you kind of navigate that kind of world, with making sure that everyone is happy and you get a great result? Yeah.
So for me, it's always been, and if you don't know me, then I'm just telling you right now. I'm incredibly transparent and open. It doesn't mean I'm good. It just means I'm transparent and open. And so, but I think you have to, right? It's just, we don't have, I don't know, I don't want to add to the volume, hey, other brands in the room, I don't want to do that because it embarrasses people. But the reality is, like, I don't have enough time or budget to have 10 meetings, and I still have 10 meetings. So for me, it starts with, like, let's just get everybody there. So we have lots of meetings with Google and Facebook in the room together, and we talk about budgets with Google and Facebook together. We don't talk about their budgets, and I make sure to be respectful of things that they can and cannot share, but there's absolutely no reason, if you're my business partner, that I don't want you in the room with me. So what we moved from was a bit of a siloed approach where our partners would talk with our agencies. And I had the vice president of Shoals, we had my second week there, we invited Facebook to come in, and he looks over at the Facebook person, he goes, this is the first time I've met you. And it had nothing to do with that person. It was just the way the structure was set up. And that's no different than a lot of other places, so please don't think, I think there was something crazy going on. I just think at some point you got to rip down that wall and say they need to be here for all of this. So same example on that Shoals person is they have a program, or not a program, they have a business problem that our new president has asked them to solve. And they said, who should we bring in, who should we talk to? Let's set up all these meetings. And I said, no, let's just have one meeting. Let's have Google, Facebook, and Amazon and our agency just show up, right? Like, they'll just talk about what they can do. And I'll set the parameters about, guys, don't fight for your dollars, and I do a good enough job of doing that. Like, just help us solve our business challenge. And I think from there, because that's really the point. And if you focus on this point of what we're trying to do, you all have a seat at the table. Some of you will be bigger than others, but just help me solve that problem, because that's what I need.
So when you think about data, because certainly when you're talking about programmatic automation, data is so key. What type of data are you looking for? What is most interesting to you?
By the way, I just wanted to go to the second slide because I did it. It was actually someone on my team did this, and she'd be mad if I didn't show it. But you mentioned data, so I wanted to go to the data slide. So by the way, this is how I think it also makes our organization better, by the model that we have. But in terms of the data that we find the most useful, I think thinking about our categories, it was said in the beginning that, look, a lot of our stuff is still bought in stores, and I am not underestimating the Amazon impact on our business. It is amazing how much money we will give them to promote our business, to then take that money and create private labels and put us out of business. It seems crazy, but that being said, so one of our focuses is on our retail partners. So if you have any familiarity with CPGs, we have insanely sized, I'm not saying they're inappropriately sized, but insanely sized shopper teams. And so what can we be doing more directly with Walmart and Walgreens and Target and Dollar General that we used to not be able to do? So when your shopper teams go and they strike these deals, digital's never part of it. Because they don't know, frankly. And so we're trying to figure out from a data standpoint, what can we do that's a more direct connection to you guys to figure out how do we take that data and then obviously replicate around that. We're seeing success in purchase segments. We're seeing success in lookalikes. I think for us, there's the challenge with Bayer brands. There's a couple, but overarching, the problem is we're not the product that you buy if you're not sure you have it. So if you go to the CVS and you don't know if you have toothpaste, deodorant, or toilet paper, you're going to grab it anyway because you just can't run out of that stuff. But if your shoulder doesn't hurt and if your allergies aren't bothering you, you're not getting a Aleve or Clarity. And so the only one that maybe falls out of that category is sunscreen. I mean, if you know your kids are out and about or you're out and about a lot, that might be something you'd pick up as a stock-up item. But it's just harder. And so our focus is when we get that person to the actual register, when we get them into the store or on a website, we need to make sure that we've got enough data that says, we're picking people who have either bought our product or in our category or should be in our category, because if we don't have enough money to deal with waste, and it's just too small of a window for us to sell to go after broad targets that aren't somehow overlaid with data.
So where you mentioned lookalikes. So where exactly are you trying to get this data from? Is it a mix of social? What exactly are you looking for?
Yeah, it's a mix of social and first-party data. I mean, I struggle a lot with first-party data as it pertains to sites like mine and sites like I had when I was at J&J. When I was at Comcast, first-party data was amazing. I mean, I knew a lot. I don't know what shows you watch. I don't know if you subscribe to the Playboy channel. Let me just get that out of the way because a lot of people ask me that question. But we do have some sense of what's on the box. So I can build good lookalikes off that. Like I know the profile of someone who bought the fully loaded triple play versus someone who just wants to buy internet only. For us, it's a little bit harder because I mean our websites, and again, you guys can think of your own experiences. I had like this moment of sobriety with my team of like what if the people coming to our websites are just coupon hunters? And if they are, like, aren't those like low value customers because they're just fighting price? And they assured me they're doing other things to make sure that's not. This is what my team does. They just assure me that it's going okay, and then I go and shoot Nerf guns around the office. I do actually, and so I think that's what we're trying to figure out is like what's the value there, and we have found there is value. There are people going to pages that tell us they're not specifically bargain hunters, But I do think there's that balance, and so whether it's through the small amount of CRM programs that we have, or just through other third parties that we can do list matching with, I think that's where we're building most of those models from. I mean, what we're trying to also figure, I think the real thing for us is trying to figure out how much on the third-party data side do we want to lean more heavily into? How much do we want to focus with second party? There's partners that I'm really excited to partner with next year on that sort of stuff, because I just think, like, I know J&J's buying my stuff because I bought it when I was there. So how do I differentiate? Because our products look very similar.
I want to talk about, on the slide here, you talk about a broader organizational impact. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think here, for us, it was, I mean, it's easier if I just tell a story. I mean, there was a point in which one of the brand managers for Aleve just came over to talk to Paul about a question, and I'm hearing him talk about VCPMs and supply, and do you think we should be looking at a specific targeting area, or we're meeting with this offline partner, but they mentioned something about having online data, and isn't that what you called second-party data? So there's just this, I keep using the silly expression, people who do the thing, but because they have a guy in the office who does the thing, like, they heard it over and over again, and they got it finally. So I think there's that art, so having that expertise gives that broader organizational impact to where now everybody's getting it. We're getting invited to a lot more meetings. So I think what's happening is you have this pocket of people who are seen as experts in what they're doing, which is fine. Like, but I've been in COEs where you're experts or you're consultants, and those are awful, by the way. You have to do things. And so I think then what they're seeing is, hey, like, they made these recommendations, or they worked with our agency to do this, and everything went this way. So now you have credibility. And now I want you in more meetings. I get invited to meetings I have no business being in, by the way, because I don't know anything about what they're talking about. But I'm digital, so they want to bring me in, and I'm happy to do it. But I think that's where but I like the fact that they're at least saying, you've never been in a meeting with us, and we probably should have you here, even if you have nothing to say.
So, obviously, Bayer, unlike some direct-to-consumer companies, as you mentioned, your products are still predominantly sold through stores. Does that? How do you? What perspective do you think that brings when you approach, buying and selling, and your approach to data?
Well, so it's if I can make that problem even worse, it's also that point of, like, when do you need the product? I mean, there are products that are need-based. If anybody here wears Scholl's, if you don't wear Scholl's, by the way, it actually is a very good product. I tried some on. I don't have any in these shoes because I have too many shoes. It's actually, like, you feel a difference. But convincing you that you have, like, that back pain you suffer from, or that knee pain you suffer from can be alleviated by that, like, that's hard. And again, to get you to walk into a store and actually buy the thing, like, I think that's where we struggle. But really the point I was going on with that is, so the average Scholl's customer stays in the product for 4 years. You're supposed to change them every 6 months. They probably are really good up to about 2 years. So we make a really good product. Because they asked, like, how can we shorten the sales cycle? And I said, well, can't we just make a shittier product? And the answer was no. But that being said, I think the things we think about are, how do I get you the mental awareness that product, whether it's Claritin D or Aleve, that it actually is better than the other ones? And so I'm looking for data points that tell me you're in a category that probably leans heavily into our products, and it's not just past purchases, it's other things. But I think that's where it sort of starts. And then but then it's the timing piece, and this is where we're doing some newer pilots about 30-day look-back windows of figuring out, did that person show up in the store? Did that person go, search on Amazon, but then go back and buy within a particular amount of time? Did they walk into a store? Because that's always the sort of hardest piece for CPGs to put together.
I guess another question that I wanted to ask you was with regard to the different brands that Bayer has. You've got a lot of well-known brands. How much autonomy how do they work together? How much autonomy does each one have versus, kind of a centralized effort that your team makes?
Yeah, by the way, I realize I say so a lot before I lead off on these things. Just self-aware. I'm certainly not going to overstate the importance of my team. I will say that them coming on board, I think, tipped over to your tipping point comment. Like, I think it really clicked in the organization. And so here's what I'll say. So spending time at J&J, and if there's any J&J people in the room, or how decentralized they are, but even within the building, they're decentralized. So if you look at a McNeil that has Tylenol and Zyrtec and a bunch of other brands, like, they talk, and I know, and Chad, who runs that business, is awesome, but, like, it's still a little bit decentralized within the building. But Chad can try and pull them all together. Bayer, because it might have been just because we were starting from such a low base, and then we threw the digital people in so quickly, we pretty quickly have gone to this analogy of sort of front of the house, back of the house. So I had a really small brand that doesn't get a lot of my team's attention say to me, you're doing all this great work, but what about me? Like, I definitely have revenue to drive, and I'm a good product. Like, what's happening? And I'm telling them, that, listen, all the buying practices, all the search frameworks, all the analytics that are built into the back end of our systems that we're working with our agency to execute against, like, you're getting the benefit of all that. So when we say buy this way, buy that way, focus on mobile, don't focus here, like, you're getting the benefit of that. So don't worry, because you're getting that. So there's a level of learnings that gets shared that I always share, but I don't necessarily need them to worry about. Then there's the front of the house things, which are, hey, what can you do from a custom creative standpoint? What are things that you, Ali, versus you, Shoals, versus you, Clarendon, can do differently? And so I think that's where our balance comes. But I will say, like, that is something, the sharing and the scaling of what we're doing is better than I've seen in other organizations. And I do think it's because of this sort of mental click that we had, which is like, there's just all this back of the house stuff. Like, just get that stuff right. Our brand marketers don't necessarily want to know all the details. They just want to know it's being taken care of. They want to learn a little bit. But once we aligned them on that sort of thinking, then they started realizing, okay, this stuff's happening even if we're not having constant meetings about it.
And I guess I would say, what advice would you give to someone who's running a startup and wasn't sure whether they wanted to do their marketing fully in-house or kind of, or partially in-house? What would you tell them to think about, to look for? What advice would you give there?
Yeah, so first and foremost, again, I'm going to be incredibly transparent. I have two agency people sitting over there. They came to see me. Hi, guys. I feel like Robert De Niro in Goodfellas, where they like watch me. But I'm doing good, right? Like, I'm not screwing anything up at this point. But I will say this in complete honesty, and it's just the way I felt for years. I think if you're a true .com startup, like if you're talking about back in the day, I have an online only business, like, it makes no sense. The economics don't make sense. You have good, smart people that'll want to work for you. So like, that to me is like, an agency for me is completely off the table if you're one of those small companies or you're just trying to be more nimble with certain things, because you just have a business model that doesn't support big, heavy, retainers. And there's value in those retainers and there's value in those fees, but you have to figure out what the business model is. I think if you're in the more traditional companies, the our size companies, I think your focus has to be, where does your agency play a role with communications planning, view of the customer? I can't tell you, 360 views of our customer. I can't do custom research. I mean, that's why I need partners. I think if you need information on what your story is. I think if you're coming up with like, hey, what is the brand voice or what is the brand vision for Dr. Scholl's? I think you absolutely need partners like that. I think the next big agency domino to come over will be the creative side of it. And it's sort of like in this press for data, now I have data that tells you which creative works well. Well, how do I do it? And so I think that as a bigger company, what you struggle with is figuring out, when do I get to the tipping point of how much am I paying in fees and how does that map back to FTEs? And even with doing that, by the way, companies don't want to hire a lot of people. So I think you have to decide where you can push those chips in. I think from the creative standpoint, I do think there's a whole bunch of really good, smart creative shops. I don't even mean shops. Like if anybody has worked with VidMob, by the way, I have no stock in VidMob at all, but they do amazing work for us. And they do it really cheap and really fast. So I think, all right, now if you look back to us a couple years ago when we were having JWT or BBDO do that creative, great creative, not arguing it, but a cost structure doesn't support it. So I think that's the other thing too, because if you haven't heard, CPGs, our categories aren't growing tremendously. And the brands that are growing are those smaller brands that are coming in market. So you have to find a way. Everybody loves the expression non-working media, right? Like you have to, at some point you run out of non-working media. And so you have to figure out where can I pull from in order to run the business, but still deliver savings. And so I think it's really a focus on what is it you're trying to achieve, and then you decide, do I need an agency for that, or do I need a person for that? And there's not one right answer, by the way.
Okay, great. So I want to make sure we have time for folks here to ask questions.
If you have questions, please stand. We'll try to get the mic to you and tell us who you are and who you're with.
We've got a mic right back up there.
Hi. I don't know if this is.
It's on.
Hello.
Is the switch on?
Hello.
It's on here. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2 3 4 5. Not testing.
Ask your question.
Okay. I'm Stacy. I work at INTERVIEWEE Network, and I just have a question about what the role of the DMP is in CPG space.
I've done the DMP thing a few times. I don't know.
Check.
So we have a global
Check.
project around our DMP. Everybody calls the Google Tech Stack a DMP light.
Check.
I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it, but I think there's a not I think everybody thinks this is an obvious statement. There is an absolute role for having a place where your data lives, that plugs into your segments, and that you can go to actually create and execute against your segments and push them into your buying platforms. If that's a DMP or if that's the Google Tech Stack, I think that's the answer. I've had experience with DMPs that are fine and good. I worry sometimes that we push really hard into something because it's what you hear. And so I try to go back. I'm very simple-minded, and so what I say is, how do I do the segmentation, the targeting, and the data integration that I need to do? And then tell me how to do that. And if the answer is a DMP, great, let's go do it. If the answer is the Google Tech Stack, I'll go do that. Like I try to push very hard on what's the problem we're trying to solve, and then map back the solution from there. And I think a lot of us, and by the way, I did this for years, start with I need a DMP, right? I need Adobe, I need Omniture. Do you? Like when I looked at when someone tried to tell us we needed Omniture, it's a phenomenal product. But when you see the data we're looking at versus what I was looking at Comcast, I don't need that right now. Like that's a really big engine that I don't need right now.
Josh, how are you attributing? Since you're dealing with so many walled gardens online, you've got retail partners who are not necessarily sharing first-party data, and the first-party data may not be as integral for your segment to begin with. How are you attributing your spend at retail?
It's not in any, well, right now there's two ways we're doing it. And unfortunately they're longer look backs than we want them to be. So the way we handle it now is media mix models, which is what we have. The good news is our media mix models are getting better, but they're still lagging like 8 to 9 months behind. So we see things that are doing well, and it influences the plan, but it's a little bit late in the game for us to do that. The other thing that we did, which we will do more of next year, is we piloted a multi-touch attribution model with Nielsen, and that actually, to your comment on how do you scale this stuff, like that was probably the most successful thing we did in terms of changing the organization's thinking, because it gave us data pretty quickly, so we were actually able to impact the fall campaign for Clarendon based on the learnings. And so basically, if you're not familiar with media mix models, I mean, it shows you what the ROI is, and it told us, stop buying these and start buying those. And so we then took that learning and started sharing it across the board with the portfolio back of the house again, and that's been able to help us move some money around. So that's the best we can do right now. But with all the gardens and the blockers in place, there's no good answer. If somebody else has a good answer, please jump in. But I just don't have.
How is it impacting your TV spend? Since that, I mean, when I had your colleague that I interviewed recently, Paul, one of the things that he talked about was a bottom-up model where digital is now at the center of planning, and it's going to have, it seems like, a radical impact on your TV strategy.
So yes and no. And Paul's not wrong in that. So we have taken, we have sat with our agency and looked at a more bottoms-up approach. And to their credit, they identified a bunch of places that they said, you know what, you can definitely go a little less heavy here. We could shift some things there. I would say, without giving away anything that's confidential, I think our ratings are in line with industry averages, which they weren't a year ago. So I feel much better about that. But then what's starting to happen is, I think there's some cracks in the surface of, like we have a brand right now that said, that's great, but I'm seeing some data over here that says something else. So what if we just plan this on digital only? So I think what we're seeing now is this flexibility that the brands are starting to get. So the impact on our team is the brands being more educated. They're starting to ask that question. Now look, the answer might be don't do that because it's an awareness play. It's a new product. Like you're going to want to use TV, but the answer might not be. So I think we're getting marketers who are more curious and asking the right questions versus just asking questions. That was a planned question because the guy works here. So does anybody else have a question? I didn't know he was going to ask a question.
I'm going to ask a question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, Talia from Exveris Media.
Hi.
My question is, what is your team at Bayer tasked with? So like when you're having these digital business reviews with the brands, you mentioned 40 KPIs, but really, what are you guys tasked with? Is it driving e-commerce sales? Is it driving a combination of e-commerce and retail?
Yeah, no,
what are your goals?
Great question, because it's not the clearest. And I will say J&J had a somewhat similar model, which is why I think it might be a CPG thing. So no, my team is not e-commerce. If sales occur on e-commerce, I'm fine with that. My team's job is integrate digital into all the channels, so that we can basically deliver the best experience during every consumer touch point. That sounds super fancy, by the way. And I have that on a slide because I have to do that in just one slide. What that means is I have a digital strategist that works directly with the Aleve team. And when Aleve launched Back in Muscle, their question is, here's our pool for digital, what should we be doing with it? So he sat down with the brand team, with our partners, with our agency, and basically laid out, here's what I would go after based on the segments you're looking at. Here's the creative I would test. Here's the different segments I would go after. Here's what I would do from a brand lift study. And then he pulls in those subject matter experts, so Paul and Jenna and Aaron, to decide, hey, here's where I'm thinking for programmatic, like, well, what do you think? And then they give that special expertise because those guys are not as deep in the weeds. And that's where Jenna says, you know what, there's a lot less focus on competitive search, so I put more money in brand search over here. So they're really shifting and putting together the plans. Our agency weighs in on that as well because they have more history on what we do offline. And then that gets executed and Aaron measures the thing. So that's where the DBR comes in. But that's sort of what the day-to-day looks like.
Hi, Denise with Ultimate Data. And forgive me, I came in just a couple minutes late, but you mentioned...
God, she missed the best part.
I know.
She dropped a glass, and then my Twitter handle was wrong. It was a mess.
You spoke about lookalike modeling, and I'm wondering, are you doing that work in-house, or are you using agencies or data companies to do that third-party lookalike model?
We're using third-party companies.
Got it. Okay. Would you be looking at in a future of bringing that capability in-house? Do you think?
I think the next struggle we'll have with whatever we decide to do is probably more around, again, like what's the skill set that you need and what's the company's appetite for bringing those folks in,
right.
And that's why I said there's varied models. I do believe that there are plenty of companies that can benefit from an all-in solution, but I think there's a balance of what your organization needs and frankly can afford to decide that. So I'm not sure where that sort of plays out long term.
Great. Thanks.
Hi, Ray from Facina Marketing Group. I'd just like to get your feedback on what you think the future is for subscription or replenishment marketing. A lot of convenience is given to the consumer by getting something auto-shipped. I'd like to have your point of view on that, please.
This is future looking, so I could be completely wrong. I mean, you can get a subscription for everything at this point. So I think it's, so I spend a lot of my time being Captain Obvious, where I appreciate you asking me. I think we all have some idea what the answer is. That I do think as more people get into this replenishment model where it's just at your door, I think that's what's going to start to happen for some industries. If I'm thinking specifically for Bayer, I mean, one a day is definitely an example. It's vitamins. I mean, would it make sense to have those more subscription-based? I think some of our other products, not so much. So I think some of the movement will happen based on the product that it is. I will say, I think some of our focus, going back to my Scholl's example on shortening the life cycle, like back in the day, I think you guys remember, like it used to be like 15 years before you had to get a new mattress. Like I don't know what it was, but that's what the magic number was. And somewhere like the mattress consortium got together and convinced us all that it's like 7 years now. And like, so they have that life cycle. And at some point there'll be some subscription service that'll send me a mattress every year. And like, side note, I thought about a subscription pillow service because your pillows are gross, by the way. And if you cycle out of them, it's quicker. There's no economic model that gets me to sell you pillows once a month. I've looked into it, and it doesn't work. So I think that's what starts to happen. I think as convenience starts to play a bigger role, and I think as more of the products that you buy play a bigger role, I think more of those things come over. I just think it's much harder for folks like us to unwind that and unwind what we've done for years and get more into that business. I think what we end up doing probably is partnering with the folks like the Amazons and the Walmarts who are doing that kind of work and seeing how it plays out.
Well, look, Joshua, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us, and thanks again.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Josh, and for giving us one of the best lines I've ever heard delivered at an event. We invented heroin.